So, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will not be distracted, from working on urgent concerns that include restoring state capacity, fighting corruption, inclusive growth, building safer communities, and to make the government work. This he said in Parliament during his budget vote proceedings yesterday. Now, the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, said it was difficult to pass the presidency's budget vote following revelations that the president allegedly used state funds when his protection unit had to attend to his private business on the cash theft-related saga at his Phala Phala farm. Well, then proceedings got off to a bad start due to disruptions that ensued as soon as the president took to the podium when EFF MPs attempted to impede him from proceeding with his budget vote. But political analyst Tessa Dooms joins us now via Zoom to talk about this. Tessa, good to have you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Leanne.
So, I mean, it wasn't unexpected that the president wasn't going to go through a lot of issues at the beginning of this budget vote speech. But, I mean, talk to us about your first impressions of watching it.
I mean, we all expected the proceeding not to go smoothly, but I think this might be the first presidential budget vote that's really been noteworthy, where people have sat up and listened and watched. But I think it is an important one. One, because the questions about the president's ability to account not only for his work, but for his stance and where he finds himself in terms of the Ethics Act and many things that are going to come up in the next few weeks is really important. So what the EFF did was try to raise an alarm and try to bring attention to the fact that the president needs to be held accountable as well. What the president tried to do with his speech was very interesting. Is that instead of focusing on the work of the presidency, which that budget vote was supposed to be about, he really tried to focus on the state of the country and why it's more important to focus on the big issues that the country faces rather than focus on his individual issues that he faces. And so the whole thing was political showmanship on the side of the EFF in terms of raising bells about his accountability, and on his side and saying, I've got a big job to do, please don't bother me. Yeah. And that's what the whole thing read like.
Yeah. All right, well, let's dig a bit deeper and see what people were saying about it. And basically, as you mentioned, in essence, the president's speech did emphasize a lot of positives. But once reaction came out, opposition parties like the Freedom Front Plus basically refuted his speech on matters such as fighting corruption, creating safe communities, and saying, you saying one story, but stats are telling a very different story. A high increase in murder and violent crimes, over 400 cases where the SIU recommendations have not been acted on, also refuting many of the things that the president said. So what he said and the truth, talk to us about that.
Yeah, that tone of that speech was very interesting. People called it like a second SONA of the year, where the president seemed to be accounting on some of the gains and wins as he sees them in the country. He particularly referenced the first quarter labor survey that has seen our first increase in the job numbers. But it did seem like there was, number one, a lot of cherry picking of what the state of the country is. I think we are in a much greater state of crisis than the president would like to put forward. I think issues around the cost of living, issues around fuel and the fuel hikes, crime, we are just seeing that the country is in further and further crisis. And the president yesterday was trying to put his best foot forward. And he was trying to say, well, I am doing a good job or a good enough job given the crisis, but I don't think that that is reflected in reality. And people in South Africa know that. I don't think it was a good budget vote in terms of the things that he's put in on his table in the presidency. He's put big ticket items there. He's put infrastructure there. He's put youth employment there. And those things he could be accounting on very clearly and saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is my program of action. So it was very thin on program of action and very much buffered by, I think, his own appraisal of his success. And I don't think that that's what we needed. It was a diversion tactic yesterday to try and say, these are at least the things that you can praise me for amidst a scandal that is brewing that will probably take over anything that he says or does in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm loath to bring this one up because it's always it's always a controversial one, but it's one the president always goes back to, and it's this whole investment summit, the investment summit that he has every single year. It's the fourth time that it's happened, saying that they raised pledges to the value of 332 billion rand, which is within the reach of the targeted 1.2 trillion set in 2018. I mean, with all that money, one looks around and says, okay, well, what is the impact of these pledges in real terms? You know, we keep hearing about it, but what is it really doing?
I mean, that's a great question, Leanne, because it's investment for what, investment for who, and when do we start to see the dividends of this in which parts of the economy? That has never been answered by this presidency. So setting a target for investment, and it's especially basing it on a very broad argument, a vague argument, that more investment will lead to growth and jobs. That argument doesn't hold, because you need to be able to say that there are certain sectors in this economy that are going to be prioritized and that are going to boom. And these sectors are going to lead to X number of jobs in X number of time. And again, it goes back to a big problem we've had with this presidency ongoing, is that it's not enough detail. It's not enough clarity. There's not a real plan on the table. There's a lot of activity and a lot of PR, but those things don't necessarily result in a plan that we can see that this president is actually taking on and achieving towards. And again, I take on the fact that he has put a lot of things into his office, and he's centralizing a lot of things in his office, which means that he should have a better grasp, especially on something like youth unemployment and job creation, because he's made that his responsibility. So why he's not able to make a direct line between where investments are coming in and what kinds of jobs are going to be created for young people, heaven alone knows. But this president needs to be held more accountable to exactly what it is that he's accomplished, what he's trying to do, what his plans are, and where all of this is going, because it does feel like we're a rudderless ship at sea most of the time, and that we get a lot of words but very little action.
Yeah. I want to bring up what John Steenhuisen, the DA leader, had to say. And I mean, just to quote a couple of the things that he was throwing out there at the president, basically saying, Phala Phala is fast becoming your Nkandla, is what he said, blurring the lines between Mr. Ramaphosa, the head of state, and Mr. Ramaphosa, the businessman. Do you recall the shame of Nkandla, he goes on to say, and the arrogance of your predecessor? Do you remember the embarrassment of the fire pool video and all the shameless defending done by the members in these ANC benches? Do you remember the scathing rebuke of Parliament receiving for failing to hold the president accountable? So this is now the angle that the DA leader is taking about this whole Phala Phala issue, and just saying, come clean, because this is not a good thing. What did you make about this? I mean, and also adding to that, if I may, you know, Steenhuisen asking why the presidency is the only one that doesn't have a standing committee with no oversight.
Yeah, I think these are all really great points. We need to know where the president actually accounts. And what steps are going to be taken for real accountability when it comes to the president's behavior and what is being accused of. If we just take, you know, the kind of journalistic work that's come out after Arthur Fraser's affidavit has come out, there really seems to be a lot of information that can be investigated. We know that the public protector has been asked to investigate as well. And even though she has been suspended, her office should still be able to do that work. But we need to ask, where in Parliament is real accountability going to happen? So the question about an oversight committee for the presidency matters, because the president is accountable not only for his personal behavior, but he's accountable for his work. Questions need to be raised about the ethics committee and the role that they are going to play in probing the president and his standing right now in that parliament, in society, and given these charges. But this, the architecture of this scandal and the way it's going to play itself out over the next few months is going to require a president who doesn't really like accounting very directly to do so. And it's going to require Parliament to do more than raise an alarm, which is what the EFF tried to do yesterday. It's going to require a Parliament that is willing to go and find the facts and the details and be extremely careful about the way it does that. And people are right. People like John Steenhuisen are right in the fact that if this happened, if the very same set of facts happened under a Zuma presidency, I think we would see a very different reaction from Parliament itself, from society, particularly from different quarters of the media, not in terms of attack, in terms of accountability, and in terms of a sense that, this president needs to be able to tell us what is going on. And it's not enough for the president to say, I did not steal tax money. That is not the question that is on the table at the moment. The question is about ethics. The question is about criminality. The question is about a broad range of very serious allegations that don't only have to do with state resources, as rightfully pointed out here, but have to do with the integrity of the person who is leading our country. And I want to see what Parliament is going to do in real terms to make sure that we get the full information as the people that they represent.
Very quickly, do you think this was a missed opportunity by the president to perhaps come clean about what happened, or is it better to stay away from it and rather let it carry on in terms of the police investigation that is supposedly happening right now?
I think yesterday was an interesting opportunity for the president. I don't think that the president needed to make yesterday about his scandals. The budget vote for the presidency as a department is an important thing. I think he did try to use it politically to make a statement about himself and the fact that he's doing, important work in the country and doesn't want to be distracted. But we must not allow the president to paint this as a distraction. We must see this as a point of accountability. And the ATM has called for the president to be called in for a special question and answer session on this issue. I think that is the right move. I think the president must be willing to say things. And in the context of Parliament, the things that he says there, unlike at an ANC rally, are going to be binding. And so we must use the levers of power in Parliament and those things that it has to hold the executive to account, to get the kinds of information that even a court of law can't get right now. But Parliament can get many answers, and we must ask them to do that.
So we've got, headlines talking. International headlines. This is big news for the president, and not a nice place to find himself, with saying that anti-graft ombudsman is to probe the president after criminal charges were laid for allegedly concealing the robbery at the farm. Then we have news that the public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane's office, is also going to be investigating the president. And then, boom, the public protector gets suspended. That's another conversation to have. Was it a matter of timing, or is it never a good time? That was something that we were discussing, and I see social media speaks about that. But let's talk about the suspension of the public protector now. Coming at a very, very heated time with an investigation like that taking place and everything that's happening behind the scenes with the public protector. What did you make of a suspension yesterday by the president?
The problem, Leanne, is that we've got so many different things that we're trying to get a hold of in this country. And so the president suspending the public prosecutor, the public protector, is the logical step if we're talking about good governance, given that Parliament is doing an impeachment process. It is new terrain for us to have this kind of process happening in Parliament, but good governance will tell you it is better for her to not be in the office that she's being investigated for not being competent in, while this investigation happens and while this kind of process happens. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to the president in similar ways. I think Prince Mashele made a good point last night when he said that the president himself, when investigated or when facing impeachment, probably wouldn't step aside. And even now facing these allegations isn't stepping aside. But I think we shouldn't conflate things. The public protector and her fitness to hold office is an important thing, and we must make sure that process is not impeded on. The issues of timing and the issues about whether or not, this particular moment was the right or the wrong moment to do that, I think is a secondary issue. What we need to hope and rely on is that the institution that is the public protector's office, with its many investigators, its hundreds of employees, a deputy public protector, will be able to continue to do the investigative work that is necessary, even though its political head, as it were, is not in office at the moment. We don't want this to be a protracted thing, but certainly that should not be impeded. And whether the president had different motives, he did the right thing, even if his motives were the wrong ones.
All right, that's another conversation we have to unfortunately park and perhaps pick it up when we see the more developments on this. Political analyst Tessa Dooms, thanks for sharing your views following yesterday's proceedings in Parliament.